Well, with respect to damage due to climate warming, Alberta's ground zero. A lot of this area had higher evaporation in the 20th century than it did precipitation. You think, how can that happen? Well, the saving grace has been the water that flows out of the Rocky Mountains, both on the surface in the form of rivers and underground as aquifers. The only reason we have developments like Calgary and Medicine Hat are because of that water from the water towers of the Rockies. That water's drying up. Midsummer glaciers supply an important part, and the glaciers are melting away. They're 25 to 50% gone, depending on which glacier. We're getting less snowpack in the foothills. More of that is falling as rain during the winter. We're having more midwinter melt, so more of it seeps away during the winter season when we don't need it. So we have some big problems developing here. Two other things on top of that. Number one, I mentioned this was the 20th century pattern. We know from recent work the 20th century was unusually wet, perhaps the wettest century in the last 20 centuries. So if we have a return to the conditions that were here on the prairies in most earlier centuries, we'll probably have droughts that last from 1 to 4 decades. Well, any farmer will tell you that it was pretty borderline for agriculture here in the 20th century, and a good part of the province had to rely on irrigation water. If we get a return to those earlier conditions with the effects of climate change and with the high population and industrial growth that we have here, we have the makings of a perfect storm for effects on water.
Every river is threatened from downstream from the oil sands plant. Not every river, because the Athabasca River flows into Lake Athabasca and it goes out to all the other rivers too, and it goes downstream from here. So every river is being affected that comes out of the delta.
When you went back to college to get another PhD, or you went into the studio to record one more CD, did it occur to you that your time might be spent better digging in the earth or learning to knit a sweater? Did you prepare for all the changes, or at least pretend to try in the years before the oil wells ran dry? When the cars and planes stopped running and the dollar hit the floor and the hordes of hungry children were knocking on your door, when unemployed men in the streets said blame the Arabs for our plight, did you shout with dirt held high, farmers of the world unite? Did you ride an ox into town, say join the green revolution or die in the years before the oil wells ran dry?
Right now, since records started being kept about 50 years ago, the flow of the Athabasca during the summer 4 months, May through August, has declined by about 30%. So on top of that, then we have the tar sands impacts.
And after I went to that conference in Athabasca, and when I found out that one of the tailing ponds are leaking, then I thought, oh my God, this is really crucial, because, you know, down the river from us, people are living for Chip, that community's bigger than ours, and like, people are dying like flies over there from cancer too, because you know, all that river, all the water from here is, all this toxic stuff is going to Fort Chip. And their water intake from water treatment plant is right on the Athabasca River. That's where they take their water from. So they consume that water, and I'm sure that's why those people are you know, people are dying of cancer.
Well, that's the island right here, and they put a dike over it. Right on the edge of the shore, like the edge of the bank or whatever you'd call it. So right to the other end over there. This is a big island, you know. So we used to hunt there inside. So that's our hunting ground, like, you know. So now it's closed off now. That's what I was trying to tell you. This dike over here, it's 160 some feet when I was working at Suncor at the time. But I don't know the depth now, so I can't say, because they built this dike up. So I can't say how deep it is. But when I was here, it was 160 feet deep, right where the channel runs, you know, inside the island. So it was 160 feet.
Well, my big concern, of course, would be if one of those big ponds would ever fail. The dikes, as you know, are number 1 or 2 in the world in terms of the size of an earthen dam. And what if we got a 5 or 10 inch rainfall event, which occasionally happens? What if we had a minor earthquake or earth shift? We know that the earth is shifting in all parts of Canada, some more slowly, some more rapidly. You could envision one of those dikes failing. If that were the case, and any significant amount of that pond were to discharge into the river, it would wipe things out for a good distance downstream.
Another scenario is like an earthquake, which we had a few years ago. You know, that happened in Alaska, and we felt the tremors up here. And they could, and if it's strong enough, they could break one of those dams. Well, you see in Suncor how close it is to the
toxic ponds.
the toxic ponds area. That they could break. And I mean, but that's just something that, like I tell people, like.
Well, there's all kinds of sicknesses going on, like polio and stuff like that are coming back. Lupus, uncommon diseases, rare cancers and stuff like that people are coming up with.
And when we ask them these questions, like how much of pollution is going up in the air, and how much, you know, like how much toxic is going into Athabasca River or whatever, you know, you ask questions like that, and they kind of ignore us, kind of, and change the subject, or they'll say, well, there's very little, very, very little, just a tiny bit, just a little bit. That's all they'll say to us, nothing else. They won't talk about it. They don't even want to talk about it.
Those ponds are acutely toxic material, so they would affect things probably well down the Athabasca and into the Slave, and perhaps beyond the Slave Delta. So I think that's my first concern. But the second is, we know that those dikes do seep some material. They try to catch it at the bottom and pump it back over the top. I don't know what percentage efficiency they have, but very few things are 100% efficiency. You have to wonder, as a taxpayer, once the companies have scrammed, who's going to look after those pumps and making sure those tailings pond dikes are intact. And there are stories, I don't know about the rates or so on, that those dikes are slowly creeping, which makes sense. There's a lot of pressure on those. There's a huge depth of water behind them.
The community is currently observing a lot of health issues, human health and animal health. We're looking, and a doctor who's worked in our community for several years has observed that there are very rare cancers being found in our people, blood disorders like lupus, leukemia, and our people are dying as a result. Things that he would suggest that you'd find in one in so many 100,000s.
I'm John O'Connor. I'm a family doctor based in Fort McMurray. I've been coming to Fort Chip for the last few years, and have been documenting what amounts to clusters of illness that concern me and the population south of here. The media got hold of it last year from concerns expressed by non-Aboriginal long-term residents of Fort McMurray.